Will pupils face mass vaccinations in the new school term after all, despite the marginal benefits? The medical officers in all 4 UK nations are assessing the science, but they will also look at the potential impact on all of us.
Well, I think it's a really good idea because it's not just us, people can go back to work and school will be back in full function.
It's a family thing and we all need to protect each other.
Also on the programme, blame at the border. Heathrow says the border force is at fault for unacceptable passenger queues. What was it really like getting all those people out of Kabul? RAF pilots speak for the first time about the Afghan evacuation.
Completely covered in people with them on the wings, clambering all over the top of them. It was just utter chaos.
And more gold and a 7th title for Britain's Hannah Cockcroft in Tokyo.
This is ITV News with Chris Shipp.
Hello, good evening. The mass vaccination of healthy 12 to 15-year-olds could still go ahead, despite government experts saying the benefits of the jab for children are only marginal. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, has asked the UK's 4 chief medical officers to look at the evidence, but also to consider the broader benefits of vaccinating children, such as limiting the disruption to their schooling from outbreaks of the virus. Our political correspondent, Romilly Weeks, has the latest.
The start of the new term, when schools had been expecting to welcome pupils, not just with a return to lessons, but with a huge vaccination programme for 12 to 15-year-old pupils. With the decision on whether that can go ahead now in the hands of the UK's 4 chief medical officers, union leaders say once again pupils and teachers have been left stranded.
Well, it's another weekend, isn't it, for all of us, of speculation about what may or may not happen. I'm actually optimistic that what we're going to get is a fairly urgent decision on behalf of young people and their parents that vaccination of 12 to 15-year-olds will go ahead. We will welcome that we need to know the detail. But frankly, it's hugely frustrating that here we are once again with term for the majority of young people having started, and the people I represent, school and college leaders, still not knowing precisely what the details of all of that is. It's really not good enough.
The government is also said to be optimistic that vaccinations for the over 11s will go ahead, as they have in the US, Canada, Germany and many other countries. That despite the committee that advises the government deciding not to recommend vaccination for this age group. Chief medical officers will now look at whether the wider benefits to pupils outweigh any potential risks.
The kinds of factors the CMOs will be looking at will be the level of transmission of the virus in the community, including amongst young people, which we know is high at the current time and may increase as schools return in more parts of the UK. They'll also be considering the educational elements. What are the risks to young people of not being in school if they test positive or they're living with someone, for example, who tests positive?
With pupils having faced months of disruption to their education during the pandemic, most of these parents believe the government had missed a trick by not extending the vaccine programme before the start of term.
My 16-year-old recently had her vaccine, and for my 13-year-old, if it was available, then she would have it too.
My daughter wants to be vaccinated, and it's across that she can't be. My whole family is vaccinated, and she's really keen to make sure that she's protecting her grandparents.
Over 11s with underlying health conditions will, like 16 and 17-year-olds, be eligible for the jab. A decision on their classmates is expected towards the end of next week.
And Romilly is here now. And Romilly, as the scientists say, it's finely balanced. What do you think from your conversations is actually going to happen here?
Well, it is finely balanced, as the committee that advises the government, the JCVI, found, if you look at purely the medical benefits to children. But if you add in the wider factors that Linda Bulb was talking about in my report there, the danger of children being sent home from school all over again, the dangers to their mental health, then it looks as though that will tip it decisively one way. In fact, there's quite a lot of frustration in government that the JCVI has been so cautious. Those that I have spoken to have said that although they don't want to prejudge what Chris Whitty Authority and the other chief medical officers will decide. There is a sense of optimism that then when they look at the wider brief and also what's happened in Scotland, where children have already gone back to school and rates have soared, then children will be getting vaccinated and pretty soon. OK, all right, Romilly, thank you for that. Bosses at Heathrow have publicly criticised Border Force for what the airport called unacceptable queuing times caused by too few passport control officers on duty. Many people on social media posted pictures of the queue. Some said it was taking as long as 5 hours to get through the UK border. Dan Rivers is at Heathrow for us now. Dan, how bad have these queues been?
Well, it looks like it's been pretty grim if you're arriving in Heathrow this weekend, the busiest weekend for travel in the year. To give you an idea, this is a video that's been passed to us by a passenger. They say they were travelling yesterday at 4 p.m. through Terminal 5. As you say, queues of 4 to 5 hours just to get through passport control. What's causing it? Several factors: a shortage of Border Force staff, the fact that they have to check COVID vaccinations and tests as well, and that families with children under 12 can't use the e-gates. But this evening, this whole story has ended up in a sort of war of words, really, with Heathrow putting out a very strongly worded statement blaming Border Force for the chaos. They say, we are very sorry that passengers faced unacceptable queuing times in immigration last night due to too few Border Force officers on duty. Border Force were aware of the extra demand from families, and we were very disappointed that they did not provide sufficient resource. They went on to say they expect them to provide a better service over the rest of the weekend. Now, Border Force haven't responded to that specifically. The Home Office have agreed that the delays are unacceptable and say they are rapidly reviewing its rosters and capacity and flexibly deploying staff across all the airport. So we'll see if they do manage to do that this weekend and try and improve the terrible long delays if you're arriving at Heathrow Airport tonight. OK, Dan at Heathrow, thank you. Now, 2 divers who were exploring a wreck off the coast of Cornwall are missing, presumed to have died. The Coast Guard believe the pair became trapped at the site in Whitsand Bay near Plymouth. A 3rd diver who was with them managed to get to the surface and is being treated for decompression. And in a separate incident, a motorboat which has 2 adults and 5 children on board is still missing off the Dorset coast. The lifeboat service says it was last seen making what was described as laboured progress between Poole and Weymouth on Thursday evening. The RAF pilots who flew the emergency flight out of Kabul in the last couple of weeks have been speaking of the desperate scenes they witnessed at the airport day after day. It even included near misses on the runway as the military scrambled to evacuate thousands of Afghans and British nationals from the country. John Ray has been listening to their stories.
There is heroism even in retreat, a quality required by those who flew these huge RAF transporters into harm's way, risking their lives to save thousands more.
You could see the airfield was completely overrun. There was people on the taxiways, people on the southern apron. The civilian airliners that were already parked there were completely covered in people with them on the wings, clambering all over the top of them. It was just utter chaos.
And amid that chaos, threatening to overwhelm any plan for an ordered withdrawal, there was often great danger.
It was a ground attack to the south side, so the US Marines in the tower called incoming and base under attack. We had some rounds impacting the ground around our aircraft while we howled short of the runway. And I recall an American helicopter pilot calling mortars inbound, and he flew off to have a look at the mortar tube.
Wing Commander Kev Latchman was approaching takeoff with more than 300 Afghans on board when a bus full of evacuees veered across the runway.
We were about 95 knots and they were about 1,000 feet ahead of us, and we realised that we wouldn't have been able to reject the takeoff because if I tried to reject, then I would have basically cleaned up the bus and taken out the bus, and that doesn't really bear thinking about. So I had to continue the takeoff. We got airborne and we just missed the bus by probably about 10-15 feet.
The British flew dozens of missions to rescue terrified and exhausted men, women and children.
The conditions were stark. You know, when you look down the back, you've got anxious faces. You had some people who didn't think they were going to leave Afghanistan. Some harrowing circumstances, but also, you know, there was relief and there was hope, and people were quite happy to be leaving Afghanistan.
It is no consolation to those left to take their chances with the Taliban that in all, Britain evacuated some 8,000 Afghans, more than at first seemed likely. And in that, those who made it possible take pride. John Ray, ITV News.
Cricket and India are set to build a big lead against England in the fourth test thanks to a century from Rohit Sharma. His heroics also gave India a big edge towards winning the series, but in the last half hour, England have made a bit of a breakthrough, as Toby Sadler reports.
Victory in this fourth test comes with an exclusive shot at a series win. It would see either England or India go 2 up with just 1 to play. The loser, at best, only able to tie the series next week. India resumed its second innings at the start of day 3, trailing England by 99 runs. The home side only managed 1 wicket before lunch. KL Rahul caught behind, but it needed the third umpire to confirm the ball had actually hit his bat before he walked. India then found some consistency, Rohit Sharma leading the way, this 6 seeing him to his first Test 100 outside of India. And by tea, India were on 199 for 1, with a lead of 100 over England. But after tea and the addition of a new ball, England got a breakthrough. Rohit Sharma caught by Chris Woakes, out for 127. There are still 2 days to go, and England will need more good fortune to win this one. Toby Sadler, ITV News.
Now, Max Verstappen will start on pole position for tomorrow's Dutch Grand Prix. He beat his title rival Lewis Hamilton into second place for his home race during an incident-packed qualifying session that also saw George Russell finish well down the grid after losing control of his Williams car. And Naomi Osaka says she is taking another break from tennis after being defeated in the US Open in the third round. She also withdrew from the French Open after revealing she was struggling with her mental health. Finally, the Games are coming to a close. They end tomorrow, but there was still time for Britain's Paralympians to bag yet more medals, including 4 golds in Tokyo. On the penultimate day, Hannah Cockcroft won her 7th gold of her career, while Charlotte Henshaw and Laura Sugar both won on the water. And as Sam Holder reports, the team's success, and they are still second in the medals table, is inspiring a new generation of Paralympians.
Cockcroft is already well out in front. If one gold was never in doubt, it was Hannah Cockcroft in the 800 metres. Just take a look at the gap between her and the rest of the competition.
She's cruising out in front.
Every time she's competed at the Paralympics, she's won gold, and this was no exception. Her victory even more impressive as she trapped her hand in her wheelchair just before the race.
Such a drama queen. Yeah, I had a bit of an accident in the warm-up. I've never had an injury before, so decided that prior to my 800-metre final, I would try it out for the first time.
Which Brit will go on and take the gold medal? In the canoe sprints, there was a flurry of medals for Britain. Gold in the KL2 for Charlotte Henshaw. Last Paralympics, she was in the water as a swimmer. And in KL3, Laura Sugar took gold. At Rio, she was on solid ground, competing in track and field. It was London 2012 that brought the Paralympics to the public eye, inspiring many of Britain's current athletes. Below the London Stadium, today they were inspiring the next generation to take up sport. Like Ellen, who got this gold for rowing in Tokyo. Have you taken it off yet?
Yes, I have done. A lot of people have held it, and I'm worried that they might steal it sometimes.
It felt a bit like Taekwondo vying to touch her gold medal, but this is what it meant. Do you do any sports? And if so, do you think maybe one day you might be at the Paralympics?
Well, I think, yeah, I do some sports. I do running, and yeah, maybe one day.
Yeah, you've been inspired by what you've seen today. And did you get to hold a gold medal?
Yeah, 2 actually.
2 of Britain's 41 gold medals so far. Aled Davis is the latest to add to the tally, getting gold in the shot put. Sam Holder, ITV News.
And one more day to go. And that's how it all looks tonight. I'm back with the late news at 10:45. I'll see you then. If you're around, in the meantime, have a very good Saturday evening. Bye-bye.